All right, thank you so much. Welcome to another episode of the award-winning Sales Game Changers podcast. My name is Fred Diamond. Of course, I'm the founder of the Institute for Effective Professional Selling and also the host, Brett, of over 815 Sales Game Changers podcasts. If you're watching the show on YouTube, thank you so much. Give us a thumbs up. We would greatly appreciate it. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate that, Brett. Every show that we've ever done can be found on salesgamechangerspodcast.com, salesgamechangerspodcast.com. Go to there and you could listen to the show, read the transcript, type in Blackwood, and you'll find my show with Brett Cheplowitz. Brett, it's great to have you here. I've learned some stories about how Blackwood has grown and how it's become such a force in the IT space. So I'm interested in getting some of your perspective. I know you've been there for a while. So I know that you started at Blackwood when the company was primarily focused on the federal marketplace. Give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself and then kind of tell us, what did you learn when you were asked to take the company into commercial and enterprise markets? But first, give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself and a little bit of an introduction to Blackwood.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for having me. Just appreciate the opportunity. You nailed the pronunciation of the name, Brett Cheplowitz. I've been with Blackwood now for 15 years. Kind of grew up in the space. And to your credit, doing your research and kind of knowing some of the folks that I kind of grew up in this industry with, when I started years ago, we're almost 100% federal business. I was employee number 4, sitting in a cube in the middle of the office, and really had to kind of learn the ropes on my own. Kind of given like hey, this is what we do here. Go to work. I had a couple federal agencies that I was responsible for. And when I started getting to work, I kind of realized hey, there's kind of a rhythm to this, and you can kind of pick up on some of the things that you need to do to kind of ingratiate yourself with the customers and kind of figure out what they need, what their pain was. And after a little bit, we kind of made the decision, we need to diversify. So when you add, I think it's a lot easier to say what I didn't learn. I was able to learn a lot of things the hard way. It was a very different time for us back in those days. And to Blackwood's credit, to Ryan Morris's credit, they kind of gave me the keys and said, hey, go figure it out. And I was able to make every mistake in the book. I'm a person who, for some, loves learning lessons the hard way. So I was able to kind of get out there and kind of sharpen my blades on my own for a while, and then realize hey, we need some help, right? So we need to bring in some people who are much better at sales than I am. So I was able to kind of go seed territory and backfill with people that are better at sales than I am. And I think that's the number one I learned off the bat is you got to have good people on your team. If you want to succeed in this and probably any industry, you got to have good people on the team that you can trust, that are going to carry your message forward and be just a good brand ambassador at the end of the day. Be obsessed with outcomes the way that I was obsessed with outcomes, the way that Blackwood's always been obsessed with outcomes for their customer. And I feel like that's the learned. And honestly, I got to say, I don't think that's changed. If you're doing anything today, especially as fast paced as this world is, got to have 8 players in your team. That's probably the number one lesson I've learned.
Yeah, just kind of curious. So give us a little, in 1 minute or less, what does Blackwood do so that people can put the rest of the conversation into context?
Sure. I'll try to keep it brief. I'm on the tangent when it's hey, here's the history lesson of Blackwood and kind of everything that's kind of come throughout that story. In a minute or less, we are a technology broker that is focused solely on cybersecurity. So we're trying to bring the best of breed solutions to our customer set, which is basically your entire public sector, kind of gambit, right? Massive federal agencies, state and local government, higher education, Fortune 1000 and above on the enterprise side of things. We're trying to bring this to bear, not just in a point product way, but how does this solve a larger problem set free of all of the problems you're facing in today's world? So at the end of the day, technology broker focused on 100% cybersecurity solutions.
Just kind of curious, what is the biggest mistake that technology sellers, selling professionals make when trying to sell cybersecurity solutions today?
I mean, there's all sorts of ways to trip over, especially when you're getting into the door. I would say the number one mistake I see is symptom chasing, right? Where it's a customer might come to you and say, I have a certain problem, and you want to dive in like just headlong into that specific issue. And that might work the first, maybe even the second time. But eventually, you got to get to the heart of the issue. You got to find the root cause of these symptoms. And if you're not really doing the proper amount of discovery and trying that conversation up way left of the problem starting, okay, like how did we get here? Right? Just symptom chase, you can fill your pipeline, but you will not be a durable business. You will not be a durable business owner. You have to get to the root of the problem, and I think that's the biggest thing. There's so much pressure to go out and hit your number, get to your quota, right? Like, hey, go line. It's really easy to make the mistake of that door open. I'm going to walk through it instead of basically saying, I'm going to take a step, like, let's take a breath. What else is going on here? Who else is involved in this conversation? What are we not talking about in this room that might be contributing to this that's actually causing these symptoms? And I think that's a mistake. And I gotta say that again, probably not just in this industry, it's probably all like, younger sales reps out there in any industry. They want to dive in and sell something. And I think sometimes it's really convenient. The hard answer is to hit the brakes. Let's back and figure out actually what's.
A lot of the listeners today's Sales Game Changers podcast, sell cybersecurity, or it's a piece of what they're selling. Just kind of curious on your thoughts, having been doing this for so long. What are the differences between selling into the security organization versus general IT? Or am I wrong there? Or you're selling cyber solutions into the IT organization how does that fit? Do you sell into the security organization or do you sell into the IT organization? And what do we need to know about that?
I think that's a really good question, right? Because it's like when I first started, there was no security team, right? It
Mm.
was network and they had some security kind of like add-ons and things they needed to accomplish. They got some of the budget for that, but there was no security people, right? It was just like, hey, I'm responsible for this. Obviously, now that entire thing has changed. I think what we like to do at Blackwood is we like to have big kind of like silo breaking conversations. Like, how does this bridge the gap between multiple teams? So I think you're going to need ultimately the buy-in from most of these, especially if it's an enterprise-wide deployment of, name your product, you're going to have to be able to sell to multiple different layers of this organization. So you do have to sell to all different teams. I think from my perspective, if you really break down what the difference is between selling to cybersecurity, right, and almost everyone else, where it's like, hey, this is what we need to take the network go. Sometimes you have to help create the need when someone says these are the symptoms. You have to go find the root cause there. And it's like for us, it's like, well, there's no budget for that, right? When you've got something brand new, when you've got something that solves these problems, and it might be a year-old technology, it might not be a box check type of deal for that customer. They might not have a budgeted line item to say, like, hey, you know what? I don't lose insurance if I don't buy this. You really have to be able to say, like, this is why this solves this problem for you, and you have to be able to create that need, and you got to help them go sell to the broader organization, because
Mm.
a lot of times it's going to be kind of obscure for right now. People might not know about it today, especially if you're in there selling to like an early adopter. They might not know about that technology for another 8 to 12 months, and you don't have that kind of time, right? Like they need to solve this problem yesterday. How do you like, hey, okay, I'm listening to you now. Let me help you with this conversation. You do have to create some of that need. And I think that's probably the biggest difference. But to be honest with you have gotten so big now that at a certain point, you're going to have to be able to sell to the broader organization and help your champions go do that on their own, right? When you're not in the room, you got to give them enough ammunition to go back and say, like, hey, you know what? This is what we're hearing. I think we can solve it this way. And you got to help them form that kind of messaging internally.
I'm kind of curious. A couple of the words that we talk a lot about on the Sales Game Changers podcast is trust, credibility. So, cybersecurity is it's a pretty important thing. So, it's protecting the company against huge amounts of risk. And we've all heard about, fraud and, break-ins and all those kinds of things. For the selling professionals listening today, I guess one of the first things you need to do is you need to build credibility right away with the chief security officer, information security officer, the security team, the leaders. And these are pretty serious people who are dealing with big, big challenges. What is some of your
Yeah.
advice on building the credibility from Jump Street, from day one?
I think the biggest thing is actively listening, and being able to say, when something's good enough, right? A lot of people come in and they want to conquer the world and they want to say like, hey, you know what? Everything you're doing today is wrong. Every piece of competitive technology you have in here is incorrect. And just that's the quickest way to lose credibility is basically say like, I've got an answer for all these questions, right? When you don't know something, say you don't know. If you already have a great piece of technology in place, you guys are doing awesome. This is a one. You can't just go in and try to wipe the slate clean. I think that's a really quick way to lose that credibility. I think as with so many of these things, you know, trust is built in drops and lost in buckets. And I feel like you can lose it on your first meeting. You can't win it on your first meeting, but you can lose it, right? So it's like these things are built over time. You're going to learn to trust me over time. You're never going to have a conversation with you or anybody at Blackwood that basically like when I walk out of there, like I don't trust a word that that person said. That's just not going to happen. It's an integral part to what makes us who we are, and that kind of comes back to the first, right? You got to hire people that are not only A players, they got to have integrity, right? So it's like
I want to talk to you
I'm never
about that.
questioning.
Yeah,
No, go
I
ahead.
want to
Sorry.
talk to you about the people who are successful. So you've hired a lot of people. You mentioned A players. What makes a good what makes a good cybersecurity selling professional? How would if I'm like a young selling professional, or if I'm someone who's been selling IT and I want to move into cyber, what are some of the things that you've observed over the years that are characteristics or qualities of people who are successful selling cybersecurity?
It's going to sound extremely cliche. Uh, I think the biggest common denominator that I see across not only this industry but all is just grit. It's being able to get knocked down and get back up and go back into the fray. And no one has to come manage your behavior. You have to manage to a process, right? You gotta have a process. Yes, you have to have a brand, and that all has to be there and consistent. But I don't have to go track any of my guys down and say like, "Hey, are you working?" I think most of the time, your most successful reps, they just have that gritty type of tenacity. They're going to get up and keep going, right? So it's for me on the management side, it's kind of fun to watch. It's also like you got to realize like you like the hustle culture and like how to push people and how to, ultimately make a lot of it's the other side. A lot of it's like having the empathy and having kind of like some EQ and understanding when somebody is like on the struggle bus to be able to reach in and help them a little bit because you don't have to add a lot of fuel to their fire. They're already just going to get up and go to work. And I was told that a long time ago when I first started this industry. It's like, hey, if you get up and you put your shoes on and put in your hours, you're gonna be fine. And it's like it's so true. It's just getting up and having the resolve to keep going. I think that's the biggest thing I see in successful sales reps.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a great answer there. What are some of the cybersecurity trends that selling professionals need to be paying attention to right now? Again, we're doing today's interview in March of 2026 with Brett Cheplowitz of Blackwood. What are things that they need to be thinking about, knowing about today to be successful?
Yeah, I think I can probably hear your eyes hit the back of their head with this eye roll. But unfortunately, the answer is AI. Unfortunately, it is agentic AI, in my opinion, kind of more pointedly. I think if you're not paying attention to this space, you will absolutely fall behind. Yes, but also just a lot of the cloud security conversation from a decade ago. It reminds me of a lot of the endpoint conversation from 7, 8 years ago, where it's like, say those words to 8 different customers, it's going to mean 8 different things. Everyone has a slightly different definition. Everyone's attacking the problem slightly different ways. And it's up to us to have opinions in the space and kind of guide them to where we think this market is going. We aggressively looked at this market for the last several years and started tracking, hey, we're going to end up. In my opinion, you're going to see every big brand in the world bake this into their product. And you're really solid kind of third party players come in and taking over because, like, let's face it, there's a massive talent gap, right? And we've been talking about that for how do we kind of like reduce the talent gap without taking away jobs. That's no one's prerogative here. But I think the tier one analyst, it changes, right? It actually allows you to analyze, actually look up the stack the way you're supposed to instead of just triaging all day. So I think it's a massive trend. I don't think it's going anywhere. And I think every single player in the game today will have some flavor of that baked into their product.
I agree. I'm just kind of curious, in the cyber world, It's interesting when you look at all the vendors out there that are making products. Almost everything is AI empowered, cybersecurity, so many things. It used to be very crystal clear, what companies now do. But now companies, or what
Yeah.
companies used to do, now they're trying to explain and show that they almost do everything. So there's so many partnerships that you used to have, that you need to have. You need to have, relationships with OEMs, got to have relationships with other VARs, other service providers who may have a little more expertise in certain solutions to be able to provide the right service and value add to the customer. What does a great vendor partner relationship actually look like in practice? What do you want to have as far as your relationships? Give us some insights there, Brett.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head earlier in this conversation. I mean, trust is a big piece of this, right? It's like any other relationship you have in your life. If there isn't a two-way street of trust, there's nothing, right? If you don't trust that when Blackwood is in the room having conversations on your behalf, that we're doing it well, you want to trust us with anything. You want to trust us to lead any conversations. So I think that's kind of the foundation, like any good relationship, is I trust you, you trust me. We're going to go do the right things together. If we're in the room together, fantastic. But I also know if we're not in the room together, we're going to handle these conversations the right way. You're going to portray my company message the right way. I'm going to fold you guys in the conversation. Right? So it's built on trust. I also think like if you look at over the years of Blackwell for us, what are the partnerships that have really just taken off? It's just kind of this all-in attitude that we leave the room with. Like, hey, these reps on the street on the field level are all in with my reps. They're talking weekly. They're on the same page. They're out there prospecting together. They're talking about what makes a relationship go with their customers, what outcomes we're trying to reach, and we're honest. We feel like that solution is the best fit for these. It's all about like if I tell you that, you're not going to go shadow the rest of the relationship because you don't like the answer I gave you. So to me, it's really just comes down to that rudimentary thing: is there trust at all levels, right? Do we have trust in the C-suite all the way down in the field? And without that, it's you truly have nothing. You might win a couple deals together, but it's never going to be a real partnership.
So, Brett, I want to thank you for being on today's Sales Game Changers podcast. Before I ask you for your final action step, we like to end every show with tell us something specific our listeners should do. I want to ask like just two other final questions. One is tell us about something specific about you, right? You've had some great success. You talked about how you were employee number 4 and the leaders came and said, hey, why don't you take us into these other markets? What's one habit or mindset that you have, particularly specifically, that has made you a more effective sales leader? Don't be
I
shy.
think it's this habit. I would say like I give this to almost anybody who will listen, and I think it's not only helped me in my career, I think it's helped me in my life. And that's really taking a step back and mapping out and planning out your day. And it's the simplest thing on earth. It's making the pen and paper to-do list, right? It's sitting down. What are the top 5, top 6 things I need to accomplish today? What didn't I get done on my list yesterday? That's the number one thing I got to do right now. The only way that I can, as a natural procrastinator, it's the only thing that I can do to that feeling of like I'll get to that later in the week. But and if you ask my wife, she'll tell you this same thing. List, it's not going to happen. So for me, I set out my day the night before, and it's like before I sign off for the day, I'm mapping out tomorrow's activities, and I'm going to add things throughout the day that I need to accomplish either the next day, that week, or whatever. Right? If I need to change priorities, I can do that. It's not known. But I think that's not helped me in just my career. I think that's helped in my life, right? If you look at even like a weekend to-do list, it's there, right? I'm making a list of some sort. What do I need to go do? It keeps my thoughts organized and it keeps me on track. And I would recommend anybody doing that, period. It doesn't matter if you're the world's top performer in any sport, any profession, you can benefit from just like having a list in front of you at any time in your life, I think.
Yeah, that's great advice. All right, once again, Brett Cheplowitz, thank you so much from Blackwood for being on today's Sales Game Changers podcast. You've given a lot of great ideas. Give us one specific action step, something specific that people listening to today's show or reading the transcript must do right now to take their sales career to the next level. Something actionable and specific.
Um, that's such an awesome question. Like for me, go get a mentor.
Mm.
Go find someone, and it does not have to be in your industry. It doesn't have to be at your company. It could be someone you were neighbors with 10 years ago that you respect what they do and how they carry themselves. It doesn't matter if they're in the same industry at all. I would say the things that have helped me most in my career have always been open conversations with people that I just respect what they do, right? I had an old boss the first month that I started working at this company. Uh, for my first job, they were like, I want you to go interview the 6 most successful people you know, without intent to sell them anything. I just want you to find out how they did it. I just want you to find out their story. And I've remained in contact with some of those people. Actually, that old boss is still a mentor of mine, where if I'm in a situation where it's like, I just don't know what I'm doing here, that's the first person I call. That's almost 20 years ago, right? So I think for me, getting someone that you respect and understanding, hey, I'm coming to you empty cup. I'm going to come to you and I like judge your answers. I want your feedback. I think that is the most important piece that anybody can add to the puzzle, is just like find someone that you can rely on to give you good guidance. That's huge.
That's great advice. I tell a lot of young professionals who are getting started in sales or actually any part of their career. I say, go if they want to go into sales. I'll say, go find a friend of your parents who is in sales. And they say, well, how do I
Yep.
ask him for time? Just say to them, I want to talk to you. Can we meet at Starbucks 9 o'clock on Saturday? My son, when he was left college and he had a bunch of friends who were now moving into sales, I must have had half a dozen conversations, and I was thrilled, right? For people out there, it's like people will be thrilled to share with you. Now, don't say something like, "Can we go to dinner at Morton's?" It's they may not give you 3 hours, but can I meet
Right.
you at Starbucks or Panera Bread 9 o'clock on Saturday? I have three, and come prepared with the questions, right? Don't just say, "What is your
Take
advice?"
notes.
Yeah, take notes. Bring a notepad. I tell that to people all the time. Take a notepad, not in your phone, on a piece of paper, and then action, and then follow up with gratitude and things like that. All right, Brett Cheplowitz, thank you so much for being on today's Sales Game Changers podcast. Go to salesgamechangerspodcast.com for today's transcript and to listen to the show and for all of our previous shows. Brett, thank you so much for being on the Sales Game Changers podcast. My name is Fred Diamond.